ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Griffiths, the founder of Ferris Property Investments. You're listening to the Entrepreneur's Journal, Episode 6. And today what we're going to delve into is the remarkable resilience of humanity and the individual. And there's a couple of things I want to touch on at the start of the Titan Atlas and what we can learn from that, but also what I learned from Viktor E. Frankl in reading his book Man's Search for Meaning, and I think I'll start with that actually. So Viktor E. Frankl was a therapist who was in the process of writing his book that was going to announce his new sort of psychological approach to therapy, being logos therapy. And whilst he was writing it, he ended up being put into a Nazi concentration camp, and within there he saw all the profound horrors that humanity is willing to inflict upon itself. And him being a therapist, certainly one of the best qualified individuals within that environment to give us a prescription, a description of the human psychology at play that was behind both the prisoners, the prisoners that were siding with the guards, and also the guards themselves. And throughout the book, although as you can imagine it's quite hard to digest, I suppose, considering it's quite heavy, he doesn't skip over these rare moments within the camp life where a little bit of humanity shone through. There was a couple of encounters with other prison guards where they were a little bit of their humanity sipped through the cracks in the wall they had placed up. And he even had some positive relationships with some of the guards. There was one particular guard that had a lot of personal issues, and recognizing that Victor was a therapist, confided in him about his personal life, and he tried his best to actually help the prison guard, which, was a Nazi, I suppose. Don't really want to paint them all with the same brush, but a gent that stood by and allowed profound suffering to be perpetuated through the camp. And he was willing to set that aside and actually engage with this fellow human being and try to support them as best as he can and lead them into the light. And there were times with other prisoners where they shared these rare moments of humanity with one another, even though they may only last 30 so seconds in these rare occasions. Seeing just a little shred of humanity in such a dark and cruel place, it's in some ways more powerful than seeing lots and lots of positive humanity traits being in front of your eyes. Instead, seeing a little seed of it in this hellish landscape, it was actually far more powerful, and certainly helped Victor sustain himself through camp life. What I learned from reading that book, and also the Gulag Archipelago by Alexandra Solzhenitsyn, was humanity grows into the pressures that are placed upon us. You can put a profound amount of pressure and stress and hardship and suffering and pain and tragedy onto our shoulders, and we grow into it. We grow into it and are able to bear that burden successfully and even prosper in spite of it all. However, it's something that we'll probably want to disagree with. Like, so you're saying if I place lots of pressure upon myself, I will be able to bear it, because it certainly doesn't feel that way. And I can relate to that. But I think there's a clear distinction for us to focus on. And that is voluntarily accepting your burden, your tragedy, your suffering, your hardship. You see, one of the things I came across was that the difference between a psychological breakdown and a psychological rebirth is simply the end result. The path leading up to either one is pretty much identical, if not identical. The difference isn't the road that you walked there, but the decision to turn left or to turn right at that fork in the road. And that's what it boils down to. It doesn't boil down to the means, but rather the firm, absolute decision that you decide to make. And if you make that in terms of accepting your tragedy, despite how severe it could potentially get and currently is, then you will find that something just clicks. The world is perceived a little bit differently. Your suffering becomes instead a challenge to overcome it, rather than your early burial. You just have to make a clear decision, a voluntary decision, to not allow our suffering and tragedy to break us. See, quite often, when things start getting too much, we complain about the unfairness of it all. Why us? Why us? But does that help? Because you're not doing anything. Not doing anything. You're just complaining about the unfairness of life. And yeah, it might be unfair, or perhaps even malicious, that you'd have such burdens thrust upon you that may not necessarily have anything to do with you or be the the consequence of your actions. It could be something associated with someone else, and you have decided to accept that burden, even though it is someone else's responsibility to deal with it and bear it on your shoulders. And you have every, I don't want to say right, but for lack of better words, the right to complain of taking on that responsibility. But you only magnify your burden, your weight that you carry on your shoulders, and you can't get away from it. You can't get away from it. So you come to the conclusion that either you're going to be bitter and resentful and stressed about it all, or you make the decision to endure it as best as you can. And in your pursuit to endure that responsibility, that challenge, that tragedy, that hardship, burden, struggle, you learn, maybe you learn how to prosper, not only endure that tragedy. To reiterate the clear difference, the clear call to adventure here is to not complain about the unfairness of life, because the world is imperfect after all, and so we should not expect anything to be perfect. But instead, accept what is thrown at you. Just take it all, let it come, accept it and deal with it, and you'll learn how to prosper. And through taking on that weight, you will develop your character, your resilience, you will be able to be a pillar to those around you and those that you wish to care for. We grow into whatever is forced upon us if we voluntarily decide to accept it. Thank you for listening. I'm John Griffiths, the founder of Ferris Property Investments. I truly hope that your pressures, your hardship in life do not crush you, but instead strengthen you, so that you may prosper tenfold what you would have otherwise. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.